What I really enjoyed about this episode is that they didn't keep as many secrets from us as I thought they were going to. The way the episode was originally looking like it was going to wrap up, I thought they were going to leave us in the dark about if Rick is going to choose to send Michonne or not, and if he was deliberately lying to his group or not in order to manipulate them, and we were going to hopefully figure it out in later episodes. But then he and Herschel ended up having their discussion on the walkway, and it turns out Rick isn't keeping that big of a secret. I mean, he still was from the group, but not from the audience. He explained to Herschel that he told the lie to instill fear in them to get them ready for battle, because he's not sure he wants to give Michonne up. He was in fact hoping Herschel would talk him out of it. Which is hopefully something he won't bother doing, because on the reverse side of the dastardly coin, the governor, they originally had us believing for a little bit that perhaps he really might just want Michonne. It was another secret they were going to keep from the audience. But then when he got back to Woodbury, we quickly learned that it's not true. He doesn't care just about getting Michonne. He told Martinez that if Rick or Merle or anybody comes up with Michonne, kill everybody else but keep Michonne alive. He apparently has much worse things in store for Michonne than death. The problem, of course, is that Rick doesn't know that that's how the governor's thinking. He can safely assume, but he doesn't know. He's got the itch at the back of his mind that all he has to do is give up Michonne and this problem goes away. He can keep his group safe. He himself is hoping that it's not true, and hoping that he can be deconvinced, if that were a word, from this line of thought by Herschel or otherwise. He doesn't want to give up Michonne, especially when he knows that the governor is very, very likely lying. As he said to Herschel, probably kill Michonne and then all the rest of them anyway. And then how does Rick know he's lying? Well, he doesn't for certain, except for the fact that the governor has been a horrible, horrible human being throughout the entire season, and has shown evidence of him being a horrible person and a liar time and time again. But there's also the fact of the governor's continual manipulation, or an attempt at it anyway, during their conversation. Everything he did, from the whiskey to the story about his wife, to attempting to get Michonne to be a sacrifice, was all manipulation. And it was only a little obvious to us as the audience because we know the governor, we know his true character, we've seen it, behind the scenes sort of thing. But Rick shouldn't be able to know, except that he's a cop. That's what he does, is deal with people who lie and abuse all day. Or at least that's what he did up until a year ago. So he probably sat across from the governor, heard every word he said, reacted appropriately to how the governor would probably want him to, but knew what the governor was really saying the entire time. I also really enjoyed the contrast of their scene with those having a scene outside of that feed and grain store. They showed Herschel and Milton talking, they showed Daryl and Martinez talking, they showed Herschel and Andrea talking, and everybody was getting along, having things in common. They have the same, goal of wanting to stay alive, and nobody really seemed to want to kill each other. At all. As if the show was saying that outside of the governor and Rick, there wouldn't be a war. I think even Michonne and Merle know that they would be better off if peace just sort of came to be. They both know that they're likely to be killed, or it's at least a better option to stay alive. But these two men, Rick and the governor, are really eager to go to war. And I found it especially poignant how Martinez said exactly that the talk was going to be useless and that there was going to be a war anyway, and Daryl agreed without an argument. And since I'm talking about that part of the show, I'm really glad that Herschel extended the olive branch to Andrea. He told her, you can come back at any time, just you need to come back in full and let it be known that you're part of the group and that you don't want to go back to Woodbury. And Andrea said exactly that, which leads me to the next awesome moment. I am delighted to say that finally, after 13 episodes in this season, that I am excited about what Andrea has in store. At the start of this episode, she was still unappealing Andrea, trying to stick her nose where it couldn't belong and find a peaceable solution between the two. But then the governor and Rick both kicked her out. And her being kicked out led to a discussion with Herschel about how she could come back to the prison, which also led to the truth about what happened to Maggie. Andrea seemed to have a rough time accepting what could have happened until she heard it from Maggie's father himself. So then, towards the end of the episode, despite how badly she wants to go back to the prison and be a part of that group again, how horrible and disgusting she feels to be in Woodbury, she returns to the city. And she returns a new woman. Her answers, her responses to the governor's replies as to how the meeting went were very nonchalant. Just giving him a, yeah, oh that's nice, okay. Because she no longer believes the governor at all. She no longer believes in him, or believes that he's a good man who is trying to do the right thing. And I think that Andrea is the one possible wrench in the governor's plan that he does not see coming. He may not understand why she's back, and he may not fully trust her, but I don't think he sees what Andrea could possibly be plotting. She is finally sounding like her real self, the self that interacted with Rick and Shane and all the others on Herschel's farm and outside Atlanta. And I can't help but gush about it because until this season, as some of you may know, Andrea was my second favorite character. And I'll probably end up feeling bad about it, but I am hoping that I end up feeling bad about betraying her. That's just about everything from this episode. I do want to mention that I'm really glad that Glenn stood up to Merle, despite that Merle had already kicked his ass once, and sort of a second time when they tried to escape, Merle got the better of him. Despite that, Glenn still stood up to him, and while he wasn't faring well, it still showed his bravery, his want to control the situation. And of course it was great to see that Glenn and Maggie finally got back together, especially since their following scene was so goddamn hot. But unfortunately, during that scene, I couldn't help but think, well, now who's on watch? Little sad, but it is the apocalypse they live in. Oh, and one other thing. Not about this episode, but about the previous one, Clear, where we got to experience Morgan again. I was of course watching last week's episode again before they aired the new one. I do every week, I can't help myself. And I noticed the very first time Morgan says Clear is when he and Rick start fighting, and he says it in this context, that you all die, you can't clear. Somehow I missed that for my recording last week, but oh well. It made it seem as if clearing is the opposite of death, as in finding your life, being alive again, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. So when Morgan is telling Rick that he can't clear him, he's basically saying that it's too late, he's already dead, he just has to stick to what he's doing because he cannot be alive again. Too much has gone wrong, too much bad has happened, there is no life left for him.